The wealthy don't necessarily have resources to leverage, they leverage resources. Very important. This wealth process is developed into 3 stages for yourself. We're going to hit on that, and then we are going to go to the big wins and losses and what I learned from them this year. Moving into this new cycle, interest rates going down, this will change certain aspects of the market. It may be rocky, but I am super excited we are on the opposite side of higher interest rates. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the H.A. Osborne podcast. Today, we have 2 main things we're hitting on. The 3 stages on the journey to wealth. There are 3 distinct stages everyone goes through, and they are very different. The problem is most people can't graduate through each stage. In fact, most people don't even know those stages are happening. The next thing is, of course, this is the end of 2024. And I had a lot of big wins and big losses over 2024. It was a hard year, but it was a transitionary year. This is true for the economy as a whole. So the next thing we're hitting on is the overall year, what went right, what went wrong, what I learned from it, and what it actually means economically moving forward because of a new cycle we are in. 24 was a transitionary cycle. All right. Now, before we get in, if you're watching this on YouTube or if you're listening to the podcast, guys, make sure you subscribe, like, and comment. I got to say this thing because we've got a lot of content coming out in 2025, including we have interviews with billionaires and more. We are being transparent about all the different companies that we have. So I have a private equity company that's focused on self-storage. We develop, buy, renovate. We've been doing that forever. I have SaaS companies, 2 startups. One that is more matured now and stabilized, that is a large company, and then another that's in the startup mode. I also own companies in the hunting industry as well as service-based companies. And I also own in the educational space. So I like to be transparent and tell you guys how I operate these companies, what's going on, wins and losses. All right. So you want to learn more from us. You want to hear about what we're doing, what's working and what's not transparent. Make sure you're subscribed for that and those interviews coming up in 25. All right. I'm done with that part. Now let's move on. Okay. The first thing we're going to hit on here is 2024. It was, as far as a business owner and in our industry, this was a hard year because we are in transition from an economic standpoint of tightening. What that means is interest rates went up to lower the money supply and tighten the monetary policy in the United States by not letting money just freely flow due to high interest rates, because high interest rates affect debt. Debt is money. That makes the money supply grow. Why? Because that causes inflation. When the money supply outpaces the overall supply of goods, services, there's too much money. That means demand rises for goods and services. That causes inflation, which was spurred on by COVID, which was the largest spending the world has ever seen by governments, massively more than the world has ever seen. While still no one lost their jobs, we didn't have bankruptcies, things like that going on. So typically how it works, everyone, when you have a recession like 2008, there's money that evaporates out of the system. You have a bankruptcy. So banks, they lose, let's say $200 billion because people foreclose, assets drop in value. Well, this is all ones and zeros. They just disappear. It's gone. It vanishes. Remember, money's not a real thing. The actual capital or money that you hold is a fraction of what money exists. All money is a form or spurred from debt. And that debt is controlled by the central banks. They control the money supply. They lend money, they have money go out to banks, and then banks lend that money and they can leverage their depositors, the money you put in, 10 to 1. That's how the whole system works. So the money supply is grown off debt. So when that debt goes away, that's real money that's gone. And that tightens and money supply drops. People lose jobs, businesses foreclose. So the government will print money, as we call it. They'll insert low interest rates, so money's basically free, and they'll try to flood the economy with money. Why? They're trying to offset that loss of capital so that people have money, that they can get money into the system, that businesses can reinvest, rehire, and pay. That monetary policy is easing. They ease that money supply. They're offsetting that drop in money. COVID, that didn't happen. So in COVID, we didn't have a contraction in the money supply. In fact, the money supply was huge because it had been going on a long bull run, like really long. And it was the longest bull market we have seen in history. And so the money supply was really big, lots of leverage, businesses, investment, everything else. COVID came around, they offset the economy, they opened up that printing press, and boy, does it go burr. And that just injected capital into the marketplace. They sent everybody checks, they bailed out businesses, everything, the whole 9 yards. That massive trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars that they put on top of an already booming economy created massive inflation. 2022, they reversed course, inflation spurred. That then resulted in tightening 22, 23, and into 24 until fall of this year. Then they announced we're going to start to lower interest rates and we're going to start to ease. So that means we're shifting monetary policy from a tightening to starting to ease up. Why this is all important economically, and I'm even talking about this. You're like, AJ, you said we were going to talk about the 3 stages of wealth. We are. And we're talking about these wins and losses, but it's important in the context of what's going on, especially my businesses and investment philosophy and thesis. And it's important that you understand it. We are now moving into a new cycle, a new economic cycle. These cycles can be big. They can go on from 5 to 10 years. Bull markets and bear markets. Bear markets or downturns traditionally last a year, 3 years if it's really, really, really long, right? Now, there's some arguments going on, and that is that we didn't have a recession. I don't believe that. In fact, I argue it's different. And here's why, everyone. In 2024, the GDP grew. Jobs grew, right? Hiring was robust. But the government printed trillions of dollars. In fact, it was the highest printing the government and spending the government has done outside a crisis or wartime ever. In just the few months going up to the election, they printed $4 trillion. Every 100 days, there was a $1 trillion deficit added in 2024. So that running up, there was huge amounts of government spending going into the economy. Trillions, not billions, not hundreds of millions, unfathomable numbers. On top of that, 50% of all jobs created, everyone, were the government. So how good was the economy? And I don't think it was very good. Main Street was hurting, but Wall Street and the government was doing really, really good because the government was the economy. And that's the problem. I think that's why interest rates have stayed high. Why? Because you can't drop interest rate when they're pumping trillions of dollars into the economy. It's like they were battling each other. The government was spending, central bank was tightening. So the central bank's tightening hurt Main Street. On top of that, we had inflation. The government spending really inflated things like job numbers and assets. Inflation's help assets. That means the 1% did really, really well. And they have done well since COVID. The government, when the government prints $4 trillion, it doesn't go to you. That's not how it works. That money goes to the top. The more the government consolidates, becomes bigger, the more money it prints, the bigger the biggest companies in the world get. They soak up that money. We felt that. People felt that. And Trey, Donald Trump. That was a revolt against a system that people didn't think was working for them. Like him or hate him, that's how people felt. And it was a clear message. They swept. We changed the government because everything's starting to change. It's a new cycle. Now, when we move into this new cycle, you as an investor, business owner, or a regular person, things will change. We felt that across all our businesses. 24 was stabilizing. 22 and 23, we had a drop in the real estate business, high interest rates, people moving out. It was tough. It was really hard. 22 and 23 were the largest drop in rental rates self-storage has ever seen. And so there was like a period of time where we didn't have a busy season, about two years. So occupancies were down, rental rates were down. That's not fun. 2024, we saw things stabilize, meaning that we stabilized occupancies. And in fact, we stabilized rents and we saw rents start to rise. That doesn't mean it was booming or anything was going like gangbusters, right? But it stabilized. Our other businesses we had were doing very good on top of consumer spending that was up. Moving into this new cycle, interest rates going down, this will change certain aspects of the market. Things like homes, right? That means things like businesses, access to capital, new hiring. But it's also going to change because they're going after the government. This is where it can get funky. What is happening is we have an economy that is based upon two things. An economy that's based upon Main Street and an economy that's based upon the government. Right now, the economy is really based upon the government. Essentially, what I believe they're trying to do is we're trying to swap it, bring it back to Main Street, right? Getting back to regular, normal people, normal jobs, things like that. Stop with the biggest corporations in the world and the government printing all the money, making all the money, everything else. That swap, in theory, makes sense, as in interest rates and recessions. If the money's coming from Main Street versus the government, it's still there. So the economy's still humming. But if you shut it off too fast, you have a $4 trillion hole, right? So all of a sudden, 50% of the jobs of the government, new jobs created, that's gone. And then you just turn the nozzle off of government spending, just slash it. All of a sudden, what's left? You have Main Street that is not making up for that difference. So it needs to be done hand in hand. Theoretically, they would be doing that, which would allow interest rates to come down. So money supply is coming down, interest rates can come down, and the Main Street can get the money back. I don't know how well that's going to go. And it's probably going to have a lot of hiccups and hitches, and the government's going to screw it up because they always do. But with that said, that is the new cycle and mission. It may be rocky, but I am super excited. We are on the opposite side of higher interest rates. I do not know how 2025 will play out with changes. Changes don't happen quick. It's not like 25, all of a sudden Trump's in and then his administration and the economy. It doesn't work like that. This takes time. There's rules, there's laws. So we will see these 25, 26, 27. Moving into 25, though, the transitional year of 24 will continue. And we believe that it's going to get stronger after having several years of really lackluster performance from Main Street and being throttled by high inflationary trends. I don't think inflation, by the way, is going anywhere. Okay. I think it's going to be very sensitive. But when you pull out trillions of dollars the government's spending, that certainly help. With that said, everybody, these cycles are the same for you, same for anybody else, same for every normal person. There are cycles when it comes to money. First of all, how we're affected in the greater cycles, but general stages on what you need to achieve certain things. And that changes. This wealth process is developed into 3 stages for yourself. We're going to hit on that, and then we are going to go to the big wins and losses and what I learned from them this year. That's how I'm going to end this. So the first thing, though, is on our 3 stages of wealth. The 3 stages of wealth are very important to understand. Now, they may be simple, but they're important. You see, the first stage is labor. For every person, in order to gain capital, they do it in the form of labor. I am selling my time for money, right? That is generally lower class. That's what that generally happens, is it's pure money for time. We all do this. We all start this way. Well, we should all. Of course, there's, trust fund kids, everything else. We're not talking about that. Basically, you're going to go work at McDonald's. You're going to go work on farms. That's what I did. Or veterinary clinics, or I did sales and things like that, right? Everybody does purely manual work. I built fences, I dug ditches, and by manual, I just mean swapping time for money. Now, the middle class is different. The middle class generally receives money not just for time, but intellect. So intellect is tied into that, or knowledge. So this is where people with degrees, right, that they're a specialist. This is where we transit, i.e., you go work, you gain skills in a marketplace. As your skills gain, your knowledge gains, and then your knowledge starts to offset the value of your time. And that means that your pay can increase disproportionate to the time that you're putting in. There's only so much more money and value that can be created by you flipping hamburgers. So unless the cost of hamburgers double, right, which is not about you flipping the same hamburgers year after year after year after year, it's the same action. It's the same output, right? So there really isn't more to create an output that has more. Now, if you're flipping hamburgers, but you're learning all about the systems, and then you can figure out ways to improve the systems, or you get better at it and you can train people. Now, the same hours in the day, your impact is bigger. So the middle class, especially upper middle class, is very, very focused on intellect. And that's how they improve. That's how you move up. When you do this, generally speaking, you have excess income, okay? In America, we're not very good at that. We spend more than we make and we take out lots of debt. Theoretically, you should have excess income and you should start investing and saving. You should get retirement plans and you should own houses or assets, and that creates wealth. But wealthy people, meaning that when you get into the realm of wealthy, that is now another game. And that means it's not only based upon your income, but the time is gone. There's no real correlation at that point to your income and your time. Instead, it is leverage. So you have middle class and lower class, time exchange for money, middle class and upper middle class, and then the wealthy. And the wealthy is really about leverage, meaning they leverage their knowledge, they leverage their resources, they leverage their connections, right? They have, and it's dependent on other things that have nothing to do with their time. They know how to allocate things to make more money. And because they can allocate and they know what to do to make more money, they can leverage capital, workforce, all sorts of stuff that is not dependent on their time. And this is the stage of the wealthy, resource allocation. So the first stage is time allocation. The second stage is intellect allocation. And the third stage is resource allocation. It really actually is that simple. Now, it doesn't mean it's easy. For example, it's really hard at first. When I was going to school, both my wife and I had jobs. I would wake up, I would work on the farms, she would work at a restaurant, and we would go to school. And then I started doing sales, which I did not make hardly any money at. It was like less than $800 a month, $500, I think is what I netted a month at it because I wasn't good at it yet. It took time. We lived basically off my wife's tips that she got while we were going to school. So we had to work hard. We had to get educated at the same time. So you have to do multiple things, but labor is one of them. After college, even though I had a degree and was educated, I was still doing sales. So it was still primarily driven off of my time. But I learned more and more and more as I kept doing sales. Now I had a degree and I learned more. That meant the people that I was selling and my clients, I had more value. I got more clients and they paid me more, right? So now my time could be leveraged through my knowledge. And then principally people hired me not for the time that I worked, but for the knowledge that I brought. Now, take anything that you do. This should be the chain of event. That first part of it, though, is the most difficult because you need to be learning skills. You need to be learning new things, right? How to improve, all sorts of things while you're working. You can't do it. You can't merge into a knowledge-based economy without obtaining that knowledge. Then the next stage is resources. This is where most people get tripped up because they say, well, I don't have resources to leverage. The wealthy don't necessarily have resources to leverage. They leverage resources. Very important. Most people don't start out being wealthy. Now, I know somebody's going to go in the comments, that's not true. It actually is. Less than 20% of billionaires received, or 30% of billionaires or multimillionaires received any inheritance at all. Out of them, they didn't receive a lot. Like it was under 100,000. There's roughly 15, I think, percent of billionaires that straight up just inherited it, right? Now, that's way less even too when you get to like multimillionaires. So those are actually the exceptions, not the rules. So there's no reason to talk about it, especially because unless you're going to inherit it, it doesn't matter. But that's not normal. That's really not normal, which makes sense. But if you don't have the resources, you have to get them. That's what I do, right? I hire people. And you say, yeah, but you have to have money to hire people. Well, I get investors. We get capital. I start businesses and I sold more and I lived on less. We allocated it. We start businesses and we flipped them and we sold the businesses and put our money back in to get more money. So we were obtaining resources from our work, our businesses, our knowledge that we could profit off of, plus getting investors' money, pouring those into assets and leveraging things like debt from banks. And now that's all I do is I am a money manager. I leverage resources, knowledge, capital, assets, businesses, workforce. That's what I do full time now. And so my earnings are predicated on my ability to see the cycles, leverage assets in those cycles to the tunes of hundreds of millions of dollars. That's where my value now is applied and comes from. That is the final stage, right? What you would say is the final wealth stage. Now, you also got to keep it though. That means you can't get destroyed. You can't lose it all. The social class that has the highest failure rate or people that leave that class is millionaires by far. No other social class has as much people going up and down, in and out as that millionaires. Lots of people. So if you look at how many people make $1 million a year, that number is very deceiving because what they do is they say, how many people made $1 million? What they don't tell you though is those people, roughly 80+% of them don't make $1 million every year. So what happens is they sold stock, or they had a sale of a house, right? Or they got their retirement funding or whatever they got $1 million. And mostly these are people over the age of 55. That $1 million is also taxed, everything else like that. That's retirement money, whatever it is. But it's a one-time singular event. The plumber sold his business, right? They sold a house that they'd lived in California for 40 years. These instant liquidation of an asset into cash, or they worked for a company, they got stock options, these things, right? That means that the vast majority of people that make $1 million, they never make it again, ever in their life. So that class has huge fluctuation in it. Not only do you have to figure out how to get leverage resources, you also have to keep it. These three stages of wealth are important to understand. The first stage is primarily dictated by how much you are going to be able to work. That is just your pure, I'm going to work hard as I can. And if I'm not getting paid enough in this job, I'm going to try to find another job, or I'm going to try to move up in pay and just work as hard as I can. That effort is the biggest value you have, which people that think that that's not valuable, it is. I actually cannot do those things. I do not have time. I don't have the ability to. So I have to leverage and pay other people for their time. So when you're young and you don't have a lot going on, you can live very cheaply. You don't have kids, you don't have families, right? Then you have the ability to work hard, get paid less, but move through it. And that's where your value comes from. Now, as you move up, that obviously can't last. And your ability to work as hard may depreciate, as well as your liabilities. You need to make more money that isn't just never sleeping and working till you die. That's why intellect is so important. And not all intellect is created equally, right? If you have a non-demand intellect ability, meaning you know or you have knowledge base in something that nobody cares about, it's really hard to monetize. And I see this a lot. It's one of the biggest downfalls of colleges. How many people graduate with $300,000 in debt, yet their application of their knowledge is either nothing or it's so little that they could never even pay back their debt. Just because you have knowledge doesn't mean you should be paid or even paid a lot from it. So forget about that. That's not true. You need to obtain knowledge that will generate a return because there's demand. People need it. Employers, individuals, right? Your business. What is the company that you work for? What do they need? What do customers need? What does the marketplace need? That knowledge that you can bring to companies, individuals, or whatnot, the more value it has, the more you get paid. There's a reason why brain surgeons get paid $1.5 million a year. There's not a lot of them, and that is a very, very important skill set. You just can't stumble through that, right? So that leads to then more capital and more resources that you can allocate. You can buy assets, which will go up in value. That's why those people, they retire. That's why doctors, lawyers, and attorneys, they have a lot of money. They buy things, they put their money in, right? A lot of those people use their excess capital, invest with us. Why? Because they make so much money doing what they're doing. It makes no sense for them to spend time on resources and managing resources because they're making so much money that they can now have the resource and put it to work. Those people give me money and I invest my capital and theirs, and I manage the resources, because that's what I do. And then when I need brain surgery or I need surgery or whatever it is, I go to the doctor's dentist to get help. This is how the process works. Now, there is a huge skip button, and a lot of people go directly to managing resources. I wish I would have done that. And that is that you obtain as much knowledge as you can through podcasts like this and others to know how to manage, how to spot opportunity and allocate resources in it. Whether that's real estate, investing, anything else, the capital allocation and resource. You gain as much knowledge as you possibly can, which the vast majority of it today is free. And then you do that thing. Yes, you have to work hard, but you go straight to managing resources, and then you can scale that. Now, when I say managing resources, I don't mean your investment. I mean anything. I'm talking about a business, a startup that you have. If you are in business, you manage resources. You have employees, you have products, you have everything that you're managing and giving to the market in return for something coming to you. That's all that I mean when I say managing resources. You are an entrepreneur, you manage capital, you manage people, all of those kind of things. That's a wealth game. You can leverage it exceedingly. And I don't mean leverage by just capital. Capital is only one thing on the leverage spectrum that you need. So these are those three stages. Most people, they can't go through to the next stage. It's a totally different skill set. Digging ditches and becoming really good at that, which I did dig ditches. Dig ditches and lay pipes, summer jobs. That's what I do. Versus being a tax accountant, right? They're not the same thing. So your knowledge-based skill set moving into the middle class is wildly different than maybe that labor, especially when that labor, you could actually get paid a lot at first. A lot of people make more money doing trades than they do in white collar work as admin and everything all the time because there's higher demand for it. The problem is lots of times that doesn't graduate as well up the ladder. I would argue that it does. You're just going to skip and go straight to managing resources, and you're going to start your own business doing that trade because now you have the knowledge. But you still have to go through and achieve one of those cycles. Understanding that will help you. And then understanding, what do I need to know here? As in, I need to now learn how to be a manager. I need to learn employees. I got to learn tax stuff. I got to learn capital things for that skill set to be leveraged and have the resources to put your skill set into the marketplace and make more money. These are our three stages of wealth. Everyone has to go through them in the economy, except the people we don't need to talk about because it doesn't matter. Those three stages are it. Now, as of 2024, everybody, moving into this new year, when we look at these stages, we talked about economic stages, personal wealth stages. When I'm looking where we've been at, I'm moving into a critical stage, a new stage in 2025. And I'm super excited about this. It is very different and it's going to be very big for our firm and everything else. I have moved into much more of a visionary role. Our C-suite is now controlling, and we have some of the best people. We consolidated all our companies under Cedar Creek Capital, and it's being operated straight down. So what we did this year, after a very difficult 2 years, especially with our assets performance, we shifted, learned, said we got to do new things, different things. We have these great plans on what we can do with assets that have been struggling, turn them around versus ones that are, how we can capitalize. We have options. Most of our competition just disappeared. They just left. They're not even in the industry anymore. Where over the last few years, we have floated a lot of our businesses. So what we did is we used our personal capital, which is me, Ron, and Sam, my two partners. We used our personal capital, millions of dollars, to float these companies. And that allowed us to not only float them, but to improve them, reiterate them. We weren't directly investing. This was operations. And we made sure we could do that. And we actually took fees in 2023 that investors paid for operations that we didn't want to because some of the assets weren't performing. So we didn't actually even make the investors pay. They could keep that it wasn't a cost. We paid out of our pocket. So we took our resources and used it to survive a hard time with high interest rates in that environment. And then I also reallocated some of the resources into other areas, including tech that would go into the businesses, which we're rolling out the end of this year, which is now, in fact, by the time this comes out, it may already be out. And this I call my brain. So our brain is a massive tool of data and data analytics within our company. I have new management structures, new capital structures, and new technology structures that over the last 3 years we've been building. This will take us to the next level. This will take it to what our company will be worth, billions of assets under management, and we can go into different industries. It is an operational capabilities that our competitors do not have. And it's something that our investors will all benefit massively from. This is knowledge-based using resources, right? All of it together. It was hard, really hard last few years. I'm used to hard years. We went through 2008. I became paralyzed. It seems like, every 5 years something happens, and I'm used to it. And so we knew what to do. And now the cycle has changed. We're now releasing those things. We're building upon it, and we're moving out. The other businesses that we had are being very successful. Here's what I learned. The good things and the bad things. The bad things are always the lesson teachers. They're the ones that matter. First of all, we were really smart because in 21, we stashed capital. So when times were going really good, we brought in millions and put it into the bank account. I had a theory at the time, which I called it the self-storage bubble. And I talked about how I believed interest rates were going to rise and what that would do to the housing market and the storage market in return, as well as other commercial assets. So we refinanced everything, low interest rates, pulled a ton of money in, kept it, that guarded us over, reinvested, and now we'll be able to explode. Same thing we kind of did in 2008. We stopped investing in 2006 and we had no debt. And then after 2008, we deployed it and got to work. Now, it's not because we knew what would happen. It was simply just because of the position and what was going on. And we did what was right, what we should have been doing, instead of being either more risky and leveraging up or doing other things. This was a well allocation of resources. We managed them well. It protected us. Now, when we look at that, that allows us to really be set up to take on much, much more resources. We had to change, though, a lot of the things within our business. A new cycle meant new operations, new capital, return expectations. We needed to manage resources better and manage them in a different cycle. Most people don't. They don't even change. They don't change their allocation of talent. They don't change their allocation of resources. They don't adapt to the new economic cycles and changes. We have been, and we have 24 as a big year. Now that that is coming on, we are ready to scale. We're already buying properties. We've got tons of capital. We raised a ton of capital in an environment where it was really difficult to get capital. And we used our capital. We have a few sales going on, which will generate more money in 25 that we will be able to really leverage again. This is the game that I love. This is fun. And I love that I am able at this point to see more and understand more because I've done it. And I love sharing it with you guys. In 2025, we're taking this to a new level. We have more staff, more resources. I have an executive team that is to dream of. We brought on new people and they're killing it and have been since the end of the year. And I want you to see it. I want to show you guys what we're doing and why we're doing it. Hence the reason why I'm sharing this now. So going into 25, we have reallocation of assets. Some assets that haven't been performing, we are going to sell, reallocate that capital into assets that today are struggling really bad, and we can buy at pennies on the dollar because we don't have to sell at pennies on the dollar any of our assets that we own. They're just not performing to how we'd like them to. So we can do that. Then we have other assets that we'd bought in 10, 15 years ago, which equity has become massive in. We're not getting a good return on the cash flow because the equity is disproportionate to the capital and cash flow returns to us. We can sell that and we can go buy struggling assets for pennies on the dollar again. So this reallocation of capital is a big one for us right now. We have set up exclusive deals for our education company. So I am bringing deals to my members of my community that they're buying right now. In fact, we have YouTube videos on it. You can check it out. If you're a podcast listener, we'll tell you more, including one of our members. Amazing. They're a family. They've got 2 kids, newborn. They just bought a storage facility for $247,000. Bunch of doors. A lot of the tenants aren't even paying, and they're way under rates because they haven't lifted rates in, over 10 years, 15, 20 years. They came in, they just bought it. They got that deal off Facebook. We brought other members. We just brought deals that my team allocates, and they're buying. I just got a bunch more deals that we put to our members 2 weeks ago, last week, and then we have another round coming up. This is fun for me because now we can leverage our resources and tools and do members. So as we're doing that, I'm able to show deals like I have on my Instagram and other platforms and YouTube for all the podcast listeners here. Go check it out. I'm trying to be totally transparent. Look at our deals that we bought. We just bought a new one in Texas that's closing on the 20th. It's an expansion deal. I did a video on YouTube that's coming out on the hunting company that I bought mid last year in 24 and why I bought it, how we did the financing, what the opportunities were, everything else, putting that out. My SaaS business coming out. We want you guys to see the process. I want you guys to understand and learn from what we're doing because I didn't have that. I thought if I could learn capital allocation, how you underwrite, what you look at, how you handle management and startups, that would have been so incredible for me. It would have helped me grow faster. So I hope we can allow you guys to see from behind the scenes as we're doing. You may have noticed on the YouTube channel, we're putting out a lot more content. These are one of our main focuses this year. I've got a better team. We got more resources to do it without taking up substantially more of my time. And I can still run my companies. I'm the CEO, Cedar Creek Capital, and all the companies underneath it. I sit on the board of other companies, and I can continue doing that. And that's the big difference, everybody. I'm not just a content creator. Now, I'm sitting here. It's after work hours. Nobody's even here. I'm making this content while everybody's already gone. During the day, I was running our companies, right? I have to travel a lot, things like that. I'm actually doing. That's the point. I'm not a content creator talking about what other people are doing. I have a firm that has hundreds of millions of assets under management. I have multiple business, 7, 8 companies, which I run, operate on a day-to-day basis, and we can show you behind the scenes. I can tell you what we're seeing, what's happening, what information we're getting from the top people in the world. And I'm going to share that with you guys, not from an influencer or a content maker, but as a CEO of a company that has hundreds of millions of assets, that owns 8, 9 companies that I'm actively managing and operating, and our startups. And this is the key. It's not like we're a corporation. It's not like we're some big entity. I'm showing you the details, the down to the nitty gritty stuff, how we're getting financed, our struggle. And we're showing how we start up, even businesses that we didn't allocate a lot of capital in, the struggles in starting things up. And then we're talking about the past. That's what 2025 is going to look like. We're scaling and we're going to have you come along with us. I'm so excited. I learned so much this year, mainly from failures and struggles over the last 2 years. It was rough, really rough. For those of you that follow along probably knew the first part of this year, man, was I traveling. I was traveling nonstop, trying to get people to invest in capital with us, which that was a whole problem for the market. And what I looked at and decided to do was I thought I'm going to go talk to one of my mentors, Ken McElroy. And he said, AJ, get out of the country. I was like, okay, I've never tried to raise capital or anything out of the country. I don't know how to do that. I don't even know what that entails, but I did it. I got on a plane and I went and I called up some people that could set up meetings. I didn't even know these people. It was a group that I'm a part of, EO. They set up meetings with people I didn't even know. And I literally just flew and I started talking to people, raising money. So these things that we're doing, guys, I don't necessarily even know. I'm trying to figure out. We're exploring options and I'm going to tell you why. The reason why we had to do that was, many of you know, and you've seen me because I was online. Well, when we went back and I started raising capital through social media, podcast, and doing my businesses that way, that wasn't a thing. In fact, a lot of people told me and the others that were just starting and doing it, you can't do that. Well, we just figured it out. It was like, I can't get big money from corporate banks. These investment firms wanted to give us lots of money. They wanted our souls, everything else, and I couldn't do it. So I needed money. I wanted to invest. So I just figured it out. I went online and started doing it, and we raised tons, $100+ million that we raised in just capital, not assets. And that was an avenue that we were literally told we couldn't do it. But as everybody started to figure that out, and as, started that, 2016, 18, something like that, as time went on, more people figured out, they started doing it. Then ads got hard. We didn't get reach. And that became impossible because it was so oversaturated with bad players. So then I had to figure out how to do it now. And I didn't know how. I had to figure it out. So I go to people that know, and then I want to share it with you so you guys can replicate it. It has been a big year. It was a difficult year. 23 was a difficult year. And I appreciate all of you guys. I appreciate you guys supporting me. You guys have changed my life. I'm shocked so many people listen. I remember when I went on my first podcast, because Brandon Turner asked me to, it's the Bigger Pockets podcast, I didn't know why they would want me on. I built a portfolio of around $150 million in assets, but I honestly was, I think, shocked that somebody wanted to listen to about this storage investor who had started service-based brokerage business, things like that. And the response was huge. And the more that I did it and the more transparent I've been, the more amazing feedback that we've had. I see you guys, we do meetups, and we have hundreds of people that show up. I'm able to shake your hand. I'm able to talk to you. I know the struggles that so many of you have been. And for some reason, I'm an inspiration, which I don't feel like it. But the fact that that means something and helps you guys, I am beyond appreciative of. And that to me means a lot. I want to give back to you guys and I want to help you guys out. And I want to give as much information as I can. Leave a comment. Tell me what you like about the podcast, what you want to hear more of. Give us a great review. That's how you guys can continue helping and supporting me. And on to 2025.